So it seems that now it's running. So
Okay.
just tell us in the chat, dear participants, can you see the slides of Emma? Today there are some problems in our Teams, obviously. Just let us check. Works.
Okay.
It
I
works.
see some positive comments there, and I see the comments from Christian, and it's very nice to hear from him because I maybe explain my background briefly, but I have known some of the players in the hydrogen world for many years, and I see some familiar names, so it's very good. I think just to start, and apologies for everyone for the small technical problems we have. Teams is a bit temperamental. I have switched to my phone, but I have the slides coming from the lovely ladies here, Silke and Pia. So I think just in terms of setting the scene for today, as I say, I'm here to share with you some perspectives on where we are in terms of hydrogen in the UK. I know we have quite a few in the audience of people who are from the UK, but I think primarily and through Silke and Pia's connections, we are also inviting many stakeholders from Germany and then from across Europe. So I hope this will be an interesting overview for everyone in terms of where we see the energy transition in the UK and where we see the opportunities relating to hydrogen. And on this slide here, you can see just some brief headlines that I will talk through in the next hour or so. It's going to be talking around the energy transition that we have here in the UK and where we see hydrogen fitting. Talking around, we always see opportunities, but we also see challenges. So we can reflect, I guess, on both of those points. But also, I think one of the feelings I had, and Silke and I were talking about this before we started this session, is that there's a sense of things are happening. We are blessed in our sector by many organisations that we can describe as doers. So those that, despite the challenges, are making progress. And I would like to reflect on that today. I will also talk about a piece of work that we did within the HEA. It's called the State of the Hydrogen Nation Report. So this was something that we launched earlier in this year. It talks about the sentiment and the feelings within the UK market towards the hydrogen sector. It's based on a survey that we carried out across different players in the hydrogen space and really asked them to reflect on their thoughts and feelings around hydrogen. Silke, the screen has gone, the screen was purple, but now it is back to where it was. I think if you move to the next slide, someone has asked the question if the slides will be made available. I'm more than happy to have these slides made available through Silke and Pia, so no problem from that side. On this slide here, just to introduce for context myself and the organisation that I represent. So from my side, I have been the CEO of the Hydrogen Energy Association for the past year and a half. So I came in at the start of 2025. Previous to that, I was working in the chemical sector. I worked for a chemical distributor and in a global role for different specialty chemicals, and that was in the last 7 to 8 years. So working, in fact, with many German-based chemical manufacturers in many different branches of the chemical space. And previous to that, and this is how I know quite some of the names I see coming into this meeting, I worked for an industrial gas company called Air Products. And I worked for them for around 15 years, in fact. And during that time, I was involved in their hydrogen team on and off. So I have quite some grounding and an understanding of this sector and an appreciation of how it can go through let's say, the highs and lows of expectation and excitement. But ultimately, I can see where the opportunities are for us to, as a sector, to really contribute towards the energy transition. So in this slide, it gives you an overview. I always say to people, this slide looks like a bit of an eye test because it has so many of these small logos on, but it gives you a good sense of the many and varied organisations that have an interest within the UK, are active in the UK, or want to really progress their strategy here. Some of them are international companies, some of them are smaller enterprises, and some of them are universities, supply chain members and different players. I think perhaps I cannot see so well on my phone, but I think what Silke is doing now is opening perhaps our first poll. Is that where we have a question, or maybe we are trying to do this? But I think one of the questions when we have the opportunity through Teams, I think it's a bit of a struggle with how we are sharing the slides, but we would like to ask you in terms of your thoughts and feelings towards the UK and your understanding of where the market is sitting. I think one
So
observation.
it's coming,
Sorry.
Emma.
Yes.
So
Okay.
yes, I will.
Okay.
Yeah. I just have to switch the screens here. For that, I'm not that fast
We are multitasking.
compared to
So
the other webinars in the last 5 years.
I know.
So I
Sorry,
will
this is
start
my
it
fault.
right now,
That's
and
fine.
you all should see that. Okay, you all should see it right now. What do you see as the biggest opportunity for UK-German cooperation on hydrogen? Is that that's the first one, right, Emma?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's something where people can maybe reflect or take part in the poll as they wish, just to give a sense. Because I think the other observation I wanted to make on the previous slide was around the membership of the HEA. We are very much dedicated to looking for advances in the UK market, but we equally have I would say through our many members have a sense of wanting to have that international collaboration and wishing to understand the partnership opportunities that exist in other countries, and I guess this is obviously something that goes both ways. So within that poll, we maybe look to explore how that partnership can work and what's the level of understanding of what's happening in each other's countries. So that's I guess what we wish to explore within this poll. But that's if I do not see so well on my screen, Silke, but if that's something that the people in the call can consider, we can at the same time maybe go back to the slides if you're yes, thank
We
you.
do that. So
Yes.
should I switch the next one?
Yes, please. To number 4. I think the other observation I wanted to make as you do that is within the HEA we're set up as a not-for-profit company. We have been around for 20 years, advocating and representing players within the hydrogen space, and one of the, I would say there's two main priorities for us. One is to really support our members in what they are doing and their strategies and their desire for these types of interaction. The second part, I would say, is to be a trusted voice into hydrogen thinking within government and within other stakeholders. And with that in mind, I'm really pleased that we do have, I believe, some representatives from our Department for Business and Trade within the meeting today, and I think that shows the level of interest that our government has within this type of cross-border collaboration. And something that Silke and I reflected on when we were setting up this call is this should not be a once and done meeting. It's something that we can look for ongoing interactions and with our government stakeholders as well as our industrial partners beyond this particular meeting today.
Yeah.
So that's quite key. I think the slide that you're on now is on, I think, slide 5. If you can you go back to the previous slide, Silke? Thank you. Yes, okay. So this one is just setting the scene. And I think, as with many countries, what we see is that there's a real step change in how we are looking at our energy system. And I give you this as a summary of what's happening in the UK, but I think we can see many countries are on their own path in this way. And if you look even in the last 10 years within the UK, we have shifted from a fossil fuel dominated electricity generation to one where our electricity mix is really has an increasing proportion of renewables contributing towards that. That's based on wind, of which as an island nation we have quite a lot. It's not always near our population centres, but we certainly have capacity for onshore and offshore wind. And increasingly, and I guess maybe this is part of the climate change and also depending on the part of the UK, we see an increasing amount of solar contributing as well. So if you look, and this is, I guess, a moment in time, but if you look generally, you can see on this slide that the electricity mix in the UK now is really dominated by renewables. But there's the challenge of making sure that we have the ability to keep our lights on. So nuclear is playing an important part. The nuclear capacity is based on some power generation which will come offline just in terms of its age in the coming years. But there's a renewed interest from our government in nuclear technology, both for the large reactors and these small modular reactors. Gas plays an important part of our electricity mix and also is responsible for many of our home heating systems and industrial heating processes. And I'll come back to that. But gas remains something that's very important within our electricity mix. But coal has been phased out within the UK. So we're definitely transitioning away from a carbon heavy based system towards one where renewable technology is predominating. So that's on that slide. And if you move to the next slide, Silke, thank you. Then we look to see what does that mean in terms of the next focus. And if you look at government's policy, it's very much around industrial decarbonisation. So our shift that's from coal towards renewables is really transformed electricity generation. The industry is seen as a next major challenge, and this is reshaping energy demand and infrastructure. And I think we can see similar patterns in other countries. The real focus is on these high temperature, always on high intensive processes. So steel, cement, chemicals, and refineries, and these, as I'm sure many of you will be aware, are challenging ones to decarbonise. Electrification can be an option, but is not always an option which works in all processes. So this is really where we look at the opportunities around carbon capture or around the use of hydrogen to replace natural gas. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, then we talk a little bit around the policy direction. And our current government has a number of missions that it's focused on. And in terms of energy, they talk about the Clean Power 2030 mission. And the aim of this is to deliver a near zero carbon electricity system. And as you see on this slide, there's a number of key targets that are in place with that. When we talk about clean power, it is, as I mentioned in the last slide, a combination of renewables, increasing amount of that, some contribution with nuclear, and then hydrogen and gas with carbon capture to complete the list. And there has been significant progress, it's fair to say, but the next stage is clearly one. As we do more, we get to the more challenging parts, I guess, of this puzzle, and we see that there's going to be some challenging targets to meet if we are to get to where we'd like to be by 2030 and then ultimately towards 2050. So if we move to the next slide. Then I guess, as I say, it's reflecting on whether we are on track. And it's fair to say that the targets that we have, I think this is not necessarily a bad thing. It's good to be ambitious, but the targets we have are seen as truly ambitious. And one of the challenges that we have in the UK, but again, I see this is not unique to our situation, is that our electricity grid we're asking a lot of it now. We're putting an increasing amount of intermittent energy into it. As I mentioned before, where we have the highest renewable capacity is not necessarily where we have the highest energy intense need, as in our industrial clusters. So we have a bit of a mismatch between population and industrial sectors and where renewables are placed. And then we have, we still have a strong need for energy, and we can see that in many sectors, data centers being perhaps a particular one that's becoming more prominent. So the challenge on the electricity grid is really trying to manage it as we try and ask more and more of what we expect it to do. I have this German phrase, I'm very conscious of the audience, but when we talk about these moments where we have these Dunkelflaute and we have no wind and we have these grey skies, these are moments when we recognise the situation of the challenge, let's say, of having so much renewables contributing, and how do we manage both grid stability, energy resilience, and making sure that when the wind isn't blowing, we are still keeping the lights on. These are the challenges that we see. So if we move to the next slide, then we now introduce, I guess, the role of hydrogen, and I guess what I often reflect upon is when we think about a world where we are trying to electrify many things and we are using more and more renewables, we really need to celebrate and recognise that we still need molecules, albeit increasingly sustainably produced molecules, but they will play an important role in a variety of different parts of our energy transition. And that's where we need long duration energy storage, where we need industrial decarbonisation, and electrification is not so easy. And where we have problems with grid connection, or we need backup power. So all of these things are where we cannot wholly rely just on the electron to take us through this transition. When we look at the areas of the UK that are positioning themselves, I guess, to best utilise hydrogen, they are spread across the UK, but we often consider the role of industrial clusters, and I know this would be similar in Germany as well. But when we look in the UK, we're talking about areas that tend to be coastal, that tend to be based on legacy expertise, let me say, in oil and gas, chemical production, and industrial processes. And they do naturally cluster themselves within certain parts of the UK. And these are the areas that I guess are sort of waving their hands to say we can be some of the initial players within this hydrogen economy, and they're ones that are asking government to support not just in hydrogen production, and I'll come to that in a second, but also in the infrastructure to transport and store the hydrogen molecule. And within these industrial clusters, you can envisage where pipelines might facilitate the movement of hydrogen from a producer to a number of different end users, and also having the capacity for salt caverns or other underground storage where you could utilise the role of hydrogen as a long duration energy storage mechanism. So it's worth, when you look to see the opportunities and the situation in the UK, as I would say, it's not exclusive to these clusters, but these are often where we see groupings of organisations coming together to present their capabilities within the hydrogen space. Okay, if we move to the next slide, I will then reflect on another part of government policy, and how government is supporting the development of hydrogen. And this is where we see there's maybe some differences between what's happening in the UK and in terms of the mechanisms compared to what we see in Europe. So one of the main delivery mechanisms for hydrogen production is something called the hydrogen allocation round. So this, as you see on the slide here, is a competitive scheme, and what our government does is awards a contract for difference. So it's let's say bridging the gap with financial support between the cost for an end user of natural gas and the cost of hydrogen, which has an agreed strike price within the certain competition. And this is a mechanism that I would say then really puts the onus on the developer, the hydrogen producer. So they need to be showing that they're producing the hydrogen in a sustainable way. It has to meet something called the low carbon hydrogen standard, and they need to have an agreement in place, and it's typically a 15-year contract with industrial off-takers who will take advantage of taking this sustainably produced hydrogen. So it's not a demand-side measure. It's certainly one where the onus is on the producer. But for some developers, they see this as an attractive way to get some of these hydrogen production projects off the ground. So I would say that the support and the mechanism has been generally seen as favourable, but the reality is, and I guess we all know this within our sector, is that it's difficult to be first. Everything takes longer than we might anticipate, and the pace of this can be frustrating for those in the sector. I would say not just the developers, but also the supply chain that are, let's say, contributing and playing an important role in providing the enabling pieces of equipment to make these projects happen. So everything's taking a while, but nevertheless, what we see and what we've seen in recent times is some movement, and some of the HAR1 projects, of which 11 were awarded contracts from the government, have started to reach their final investment decision and are now moving forward, where we have some hydrogen production already, and we have others that will come on stream in the next couple of years. And I highlight those within the slide. As I say, these will be shared because I recognise some of this text is quite small, but you can see here the types of projects that have been approved and moved forward through HAR1. One is with a developer called Morgen, with a project in South Wales, and they are decarbonising ports and industrial operations. The project in Barrow, which is in Cumbria, which is in the north of England, is actually making, it's with a company that are making tissue paper products. So it's an industrial project or industrial process. We say that they're decarbonising with the use of hydrogen. And the third one is with a company called Geopura. They have been working with their partner JG Pears, and they have an old coal site where they are producing hydrogen, and in fact they are using that in a more distributed way. So they are taking the hydrogen. I have some examples of what they're doing in a later slide, but they have a number of different off-takers who are typically not grid connected and are looking for green power. So the HAR1 is moving forward. It's taking time, but we do see these milestones, and they're really important. Where we have, I would say, as a sector, some more frustration is on the pace of developments with the next set of projects. So HAR2 is has been confirmed with government support. There has been a listing of 27 shortlisted projects, but we still wait to see which of those projects will move forward. So we're waiting, most notably the developers, but the sector as a whole are waiting to see how we can move forward with the invitation to offer. So which of these projects will move forward and then move to contract signing. So that's something that I think the pace of that has been highly anticipated by our sector, and we really encourage government to move forward with that. There's also been a commitment from government for a HAR3, and they have promised a market engagement. So there will be more projects of a similar nature that government has said it will fund. But we again wait for the market engagement and the opening of that particular process. So that's where we are on that one. Silke, I think in terms of the polls, maybe we could add them at the very end to save you from switching the slides, because we were going to do a poll here, but I think in the interest of just keeping things flowing, maybe we move to the next slide already.
Yes, I can do that in parallel. So up to you. We have some time, so it's ready to go. And I think Emma, that was the next one. Compared with Germany, UK hydrogen policy is currently. That's it, right?
Yes,
okay.
That's right.
So, dear participant, it's now running, and you have the chance to choose. Compared with Germany, UK hydrogen policy is currently more ambitious, about the same, less ambitious, or too early to judge. Now it's your turn. We'll give you around 30 seconds or something like that, while Emma is going ahead, and I'm happy to switch the slides when you are ready, Emma.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So I see we have the next slide. Oh no, we're waiting now. We wait for a few seconds, and then what I will reflect on is, as I say, that I've talked so far about the large schemes that our government is supporting, and as I say, we generally are see this as a very favourable thing, but the main topic of is just trying to keep that pace, and we do recognise that governments have many things to juggle, but where we have a sector that's anticipating some updates that have been, let's say, predicted by the government, and they do not come so fast, then it does cause some pain points and some issues with the confidence of the sector. But overall, I think the fact that these are moving within HAR1 is a good sign for us all. So so yes, I think that's where we are with that one. And I think if we move to the next slide, Silke.
Yes, I will do. And in the meantime, I can tell you that for now, 41% do say that it's less ambitious. So the UK hydrogen policy is currently less ambitious. 16% more ambitious, 20 about the same, and 23 too early to judge. So
that's fair. That probably reflects people's different experiences, and I think this is where we are as a sector, isn't it?
yeah.
And I think this it does feed quite nicely into this next slide I have, because what I observe is that there's you know some developers have looked to the schemes that we have within the UK and have committed themselves to being part of this and supporting this drive towards industrial decarbonisation. And I think it's very good for our sector that these developers are doing this. But for others, they have maybe different strategies. Either they are waiting, so they do something else while they are waiting, or they have a different strategy that is less directly connected to government funding and is more just looking at the opportunities as we move through this energy transition. And what I've put in this slide is just some examples of where we see this. So things are happening. I would say the scale can be smaller, but the visibility can be truly important. We have see, and again, there's some examples there. The text is quite small, but we will share these slides afterwards. But we have companies who are looking at small scale sustainable hydrogen production, and it often can be to support off grid demands. I reflected in the earlier slides some of the challenges we have with our grid in terms of what we're asking of it. And what that reflects and means in reality is that for some players, they have a long waiting time to access grid connection. So in some cases, we see hydrogen or fuel cell technology as being a stepping stone to keeping them within power. Some developers look for these behind the meter solutions. So how can they, not connect to the grid because it's becoming impractical in the timescales they would like. So what can they do in the meantime? So that kind of off-grid demand for practicality is something where we see companies are being agile and finding opportunities. And the other one is also off-grid, but it's more the practical side. So if you look in construction projects, then it's often quite difficult to plug into the wall if you are in the middle, let's say, of a field or somewhere where you are truly far away from the grid, or you have a temporary power need. So in these cases, what we see is the fuel cell replacing diesel technology. So diesel generators are being switched for fuel cell, often fuel cell and batteries. Now, the question is what drives that demand? Sometimes it's because the end user wants to be sustainable and sees this as one way for making this switch. For others, it's perhaps a positioning in terms of their sustainability credentials. They're putting that into the writing it into the contracts. For those that take part, have to adhere to this more sustainable standard, and I think that's the examples that we see. One significant one is when we have these national infrastructure projects. So currently we have a major project down in the south of England called the Lower Thames Crossing. So we are building a new tunnel under to facilitate transport across the Thames, and this major project is built in some sustainability criteria, and is really looking to operate in a way with minimal carbon and emissions, and as such they have been utilising or building in the opportunity to use fuel cell technology alongside batteries and other clean power systems. So we see that these types of opportunities are giving some players the ability to invest in hydrogen production. Sometimes it's from electrolytic hydrogen, other times it's associated with these HAR schemes, but not always. And we also have some players that are looking at other solutions such as cracking ammonia, looking at ammonia from, or let's say hydrogen from waste products, more innovative pathways that are place-based, if you like, based on feedstock that could be available and close to the end user. So there's a lot of entrepreneurship and a lot of companies that I would say are looking to find those opportunities that are not those big scale hard projects, but the visibility and the learning that we gain from these types of projects, I think really helps with the sector confidence. We do see that there's on the mobility side, I've not spoke so much about mobility, but there's the situation where we see a move towards electrification of land vehicles within the UK, but we also see a number of commercial fleet operators that would struggle to carry out their operations purely on battery technology, and they are looking for hydrogen solutions. I'll reflect on this in some other slides, but we are lacking, I would say, a coherent strategy towards hydrogen mobility that we do observe from other countries, particularly in Germany and the Netherlands. So there's a need there, but it sometimes is not fully appreciated in, let me say, the larger scale developments that we sometimes see with battery vehicle technology. Defence is always something that's of interest. I think every country in Europe has this in their minds with everything that's happening, and this is a sector that I think has certain needs in terms of agility and needing to be able to access power in a, as I say, an agile and a mobile way. And I know many of our members are let's say looking to see what solutions they could add to that. And I think the other things that we've seen in terms of government's commitment is an appreciation of the value of our supply chain. Is something we continue to, I guess, to discuss with government. But most notably, we've seen a recent investment that our UK government has made in one of the key manufacturers within the UK, and that's a company called ITM Power. So that gives, I guess, an example of a certain level of confidence in the sector and the jobs and opportunities that it can bring within the UK. So move to the next slide. I think the next slide I have lots of pictures. So I often like to back up these statements with just showing you what we see in the field. So the next couple of slides show that. This just gives you a sense of some of the things that I certainly see when I go out and about and I meet our members and other players. So we have at the top left there, you see a mobile refueling system, and that's with a Toyota Mirai. So we do have some examples of nice projects with mobility, but as I say, it's not really backed up by I would say a large strategy towards meeting the infrastructure needs of hydrogen. But there are certainly many companies that are innovating within this space. The slide in the middle at the top is of a train. So when we talk about land transport, we should not maybe forget the rail. There is a push towards electrification and bimodal systems on our trains, but there are some situations where, again, practically it's difficult to do that. So this company, Vanguard, is developing a hydrogen and electric powered train that is not just suitable for the UK, but they're an example of a company that's interested in finding opportunities in other countries. The picture with the plane is actually not a hydrogen powered plane, but it's an example of a turnaround of a flight that was powered by hydrogen. So the small vehicles that we use to move the baggage off the plane and to move the plane into position, these were all powered using hydrogen technology, and that was a live flight that came into Exeter Airport last year. The most entertaining thing I found was the people that were coming off the plane from their holidays. They had all these excitable people taking their photographs, and I think they did not know why, but we were very excited about the hydrogen technology, and they were simply coming home from their vacation. But this was a very nice example of the technology in action. You see below that, we do have some hydrogen bus fleets in the UK, and this one is in Crawley. It has actually a large liquid hydrogen storage. That's for their products, and they do not fuel with liquid, but they use liquid on site to store the hydrogen, and then they fuel a large fleet of buses that's close to Gatwick Airport. So the next time you're flying into the UK, you can keep an eye out for that. The one next to that, the HPU, is Geopura's fuel cell power unit. And as I say, that's been used for construction applications. They use it a lot at music festivals, where the operators of those festivals want to move away from diesel generators, and they often do use it actually for providing the power for EV charging. So it's an interesting example of where hydrogen and electric technology is coming together. And beside that is a company called H-Power, who have an ammonia cracker, who are producing hydrogen, and again, very much involved in the construction market, amongst others. So that's some examples. Up at the top is also a Bowser system. So that's from a company of ours called Ulemco. They are able to deliver the hydrogen to where it needs to be and dispense it. So it's another innovation within hydrogen mobility while we wait for a larger fixed infrastructure. So we do see our members doing many and varied and interesting things, and we'd be happy to connect you to any of them if you're interested in learning some more. And on the next slide, I think I have a few more examples, just with some more pictures. Proteum is a company that, one of the ones I mentioned, that's actually just starting up some electrolyzers, and they are doing that not as part of the HAR program, but because they see a need for many of the applications I've mentioned. So they're producing the hydrogen in South Wales, and then they are delivering it by road trailer to many of these types of off-grid or power applications. And the H-Power cracker I show there. There's a few more pictures there of the Crawley bus station. I think it's quite nice to see the liquid tank as well as the fueling. And I talked a bit before about the industrial clusters. The picture in the top is in an area in the northeast of the UK called Teesside. This is where there's a huge legacy in steel production and heavy industrial manufacturing. And the site at Teeswork is now being repurposed, I would say, as a centre where we are carrying out carbon capture. I think eventually looking at some hydrogen production projects, making wind turbines, and really pushing forward what was a legacy industrial area into one that's been repurposed for clean technology. So it's really inspiring, I think, to see these types of things in action. On the next slide, we have this is a resource that you will see on the HEA's website, so I encourage you to do that. It's an open source, so it's based on what we within our small team see happening in the market. We benefit from people telling us if their projects are developing or ongoing, but we do try to map all of the projects that have been announced or are ongoing. So if you're interested to really see and learn about some of the opportunities here in the UK, I encourage you to have a look, because we'll share the slides. You will be able to access that link. Okay. On the next slide, I'm just going to say a few words. When I started this presentation, I talked to you a little bit about the State of the Hydrogen Nation report. So again, this is something that you can download from the HEA's website. I mentioned the background before, but just briefly to say that we had this survey that we carried out at the end of last year. We had over 140 respondents, and we partnered with other associations such as Hydrogen Scotland and Ireland and other trade associations. So we really looked to get a broad spread of those working in the hydrogen sector and encouraging them to complete this survey. So if you go into the next slide, you can see some of the headlines from this, and it's a mixed bag where we see a sector that is really ready to deliver and wants to move on and do things, and many companies are starting to do that. But the policy delays, I think we cannot avoid the fact that they can affect confidence within the sector, both from investors as well as companies that are, trying to build teams and get them to be doing stuff. There's an open question, I would say, as to whether our lack of demand side measures can really affect some of our progress. We need to make sure that the off-takers have a motivation to move forward. Some of them are doing this, but for others, they would benefit perhaps from some more policy levers. And we feel in some ways we're lacking some of those. And what we try to indicate in this report is the sense of the opportunity, but also the risk of falling behind if we do not, let's say, move forward with some of these promised activities, particularly in the policy space. So if you move to the next slide, again, there's just a few more headlines from this report. It talks about, and this I guess is important when we talk and engage on the political level, everyone wants to see that we're delivering not just net zero targets, but also jobs and opportunities, and we reflect that within the report itself. And again, you can look in this report for more details. I think for the audience here, what's quite interesting is the next slide, and it speaks to the level of interest, I would say, that players within the UK have into other countries, and I think most notably on this slide, when we asked the question around, and this was, I say, towards the end of last year, what was perceived as being countries that were viewed as attractive for hydrogen investment, then Germany was actually the top, and this was predominantly a UK based audience. So I think there's definitely a desire to want to engage with our European neighbours, and particularly in Germany, where we see that things are happening, and there is a sort of a sense of need to move forward with hydrogen as part of that energy transition. So we would welcome, I would say, ongoing interaction between our two nations. We look at the next slide. This one summarises just some of the key points. So maybe I do not stay on this one for so long, because I think this covers many of the points that have already been made in the last slides. But if you read the report, you can see these into more detail. And the next one, I think, just shows our desire as a sector to want to engage with our with the people that are driving our policy. So on the next slide, Silke, it's again just some photographs. There tends to be lots of photographs of me in a red suit often, but we had a very well attended event. This was at the start of this year, and at that event we had ministerial representation, as well as many of our parliamentarians who really want to see what's the opportunities for jobs and growth within my constituency, within my region of the UK. So it was a very well received event, that one. And if I move on to the next slide, this also reflects on where we see opportunities for the sector to come together. So only last week we had within the HEA our annual conference. So this takes place within London. We have it quite close to the seat of government, so that we can make sure we have government officials can attend, easily, as well as government ministers. We were sold out for this event, which was very pleasing, I think, because sometimes we feel our sector can be in a state of inertia, or sometimes people feel the challenges, but people wanted to come together and be in the same room. And what we did within this conference was address some of these concerns on the demand side. So we encouraged some of the HAR project off-takers to come in the room, as well as representatives from TV and film, from the construction sector, from our defence sector, and from those involved in other areas such as codes and standards, in regulation, as well as many of our members that cover the supply chain. So it was as I say, it was a fully sold out event where we really felt the positivity in the room, and I hope when we think about our sector, moving from this pit of let's say the hype of excitement into the challenges that we've seen in the last couple of years. I think having such a grouping of people that were wholly feeling positive gives us a sense that maybe we are coming into a more positive state of affairs. On the next slide, there's just a little bit more about the local politics that we have here in the UK. So for those of you that follow UK politics, you may be aware that we have recently lost our Prime Minister. So we have a relatively new government. It's been in place for 2 years. And I spoke to you at the start of this presentation about their agenda, particularly towards energy. That has not changed. I would say those priorities remain, but the person in charge has changed and will change. I think for various reasons, our current Prime Minister has resigned, and now we have a new gentleman called Andy Burnham, who is not officially the UK Prime Minister, but on Monday he will be. So we've had some changing within the ranks. We also have, if you look into UK politics, the other person that's probably most important within our space is a gentleman called Ed Miliband, and he is currently the Secretary of State for our Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. So when I spoke earlier around the Clean Power 2030 mission, that's really been developed and led and spearheaded by Ed Miliband. We're in a very agile situation. So as of yesterday, if you had asked me, there was a consensus that this gentleman, Ed Miliband, may move from the Energy Department to becoming the Chancellor. But if I listened to the news this morning, now the speculation is perhaps that he will not. So we're in a very agile state within UK politics, but I think we can be fairly confident that as of Monday we will have a new Prime Minister in the face of Andy Burnham. And Andy has made a number of statements that talk about the importance of place, the importance of the regions of the UK, the importance of supply chains. So I think for all of these reasons, we like to think that these are positive signs to support industrial manufacturing, the role of industrial supply chains, and the role of clusters. So all of the things that I've spoken about. But it remains to be seen. We're going to have an interesting summer while he sets his agenda, and then we will see in the autumn how things come. But we truly hope that the anticipated updates on HAR and on our updates on hydrogen strategy will come quite soon in the autumn time. Okay, and then this one is my final slide. So here we talk about what's coming next, and it's I really just reflect on some of the things I've shared with you today. That the HAR program is moving forward. It's encouraging the production of sustainably produced hydrogen. The pace and the scale of that is less than what we anticipated if you go back 2 to 3 years. But the projects are happening, I would say, are ones that are robust and credible. And I think as they come on stream, that will do a lot for sector confidence. We anticipate this government hydrogen strategy, and I reflected on the fact that this will not just talk about how the hydrogen will be produced and the how around, but also hydrogen's role in long duration energy storage and certain business models around transport and storage. So around these industrial clusters and how we will move and store hydrogen. I think the challenges with grid constraint and the regulation are not going away. So what I see there is there's challenges for our energy transition, but there's opportunities for those that can step in and provide solutions to some of those. And many of those can be molecule based and utilize hydrogen technology. And government support towards trying to look at things such as our energy price. That's a real challenge in the UK for many manufacturers. So we continue to see how they will look to evolve their thinking on that to keep our manufacturers sustainable and working within the UK. Make my final remark just on mobility. I've mentioned this already, but there's a need, I think, for perhaps a greater recognition that hydrogen as well as battery technologies will play a role in the UK to support the decarbonisation of our land transport. But I think there's things that we can learn from what's happening in Germany and in other parts of Europe in terms of having that mindset of wanting to encourage the infrastructure that will support the rollout of all types of vehicles to meet different use cases. And with that, I move to the last slide. And in this one, you are welcome to reach out and to continue the conversation either through Silke or to reach out directly. And I would welcome the opportunity to continue the conversation. And I thank you so much both for your patience at the start, because the technical challenges, I think, were not Silke's, they were mine. So thank you, Silke, for steering us through this. And yeah, thank you all for your time today.
Dear Emma, I think it was a crazy mix of German and UK problems here, because then for the switching with two screens, it was also, sometimes perhaps a little slow. So dear participants, sorry for that. But Emma, I think you really had the chance in the last, let's say, 40 minutes or so to really bring us deep into UK policy. And I would now de-share your slides so that I can here also work a little better with the questions that are now coming. And because I can tell you we have some, and perhaps my team can bring the email address into the chat, and then if there is any inquiries or deeper questions, feel free to contact Emma, and she and her team will try, as always, answer best what's going on. And yes, for sure, Emma, we have some first questions, I can tell you. And we also have a last poll, I think, and we can let that run. Or should we do that afterwards, Emma? I think we can do that right now.
We can do, I think the last poll, if I recall rightly, is more just consolidating people's thoughts as to whether maybe they have come out of this meeting with more knowledge than they had before, or maybe I suspect there are still some more questions, right? You know, we are always learning, I think, from all sides, right? So
every time when we meet, so feel free, dear webinar participants. The poll is now running and it asks you, after today's webinar, which area would you like to explore further? UK policy and regulation, or funding mechanisms, or UK-Germany partnerships, or hydrogen markets and trade, or technical development. So you have to choose one for today. If there are more or all, then feel free to email Emma and team. So we let it run a little bit, and I go to the Q&A section. If there is any question, dear guests, then feel free to bring it now onto our desk. So Emma, when you're ready, I will start. The
Of
first
course.
question, some half an hour ago, came from Afrin Merchant, and
Mm.
it was, is there a floor price for the CFD? And I have to add that Olivia has just answered in the chat, but I think it would be worthwhile for the others when you can bring that in also now to the discussion.
Yes. Okay. No, that's great. I wonder what's how Olivia answered this to
I
make sure I can
searched,
compliment well what she has
yeah,
said.
I
So,
searched it.
yeah.
Yes, there
But
is a floor
yeah.
price indicates hydrogen production business model. This document explains how the mechanism works
Ah,
in more
perfect.
detail. She shared, so it was the chat from 342,
Mm.
and if you want to download that, feel free.
Excellent. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's that, and as there's lots of documentation that can be drawn upon. So, thank you, Liv, for sharing that. But we see each of the HAR round is now becoming somewhat independent of each other. So I think what government has said is that there will be some learnings transferred from HAR 1 and how they determined the strike price into HAR 2, but the details of that we still wait for, and then we wait to see how this evolves into HAR 3. I think ultimately government would is committed to this scheme. It wants to see if the amount of subsidy that government provides over time will come down, and I think that will be the interesting point as to whether these projects, which are still the in many cases first of a kind, can achieve that aim. But for sure there's a lot of detailed information. So I encourage you to read the documents and the links that Liv has shared, and then we can answer if there's remaining questions after that, of course.
Then I will add a question from James Nolan. Hello, Emma. The projects in the photos are relatively small. When will there be 100 megawatt and more electrolyzers and projects commissioned and working in the UK?
That's a really good question. I think this reflects on what I was saying before, how when we were at the hype of the top of this hype curve, there was a huge ambition as to the scale, and I think now the reality is that I think we're in a different place where these things will come, but I think the time scale in which they come, I do not wish to predict a precise date, but I see the learnings that come from these smaller projects, and also the ones that are starting to be delivered under HAR, which cumulatively will start to build up a sense of volume in terms of what we can make within the UK. It's taking time, and I think there's maybe the lower risk case associated with some of these smaller projects is no bad thing, because it means that we can demonstrate that the technology is not the problem here. It's the reality of bringing everything together, the relationship between developer and off-taker, and that sense of confidence that this can work in the long term. So I think we have to wait a little bit longer, but I see that the confidence that's coming from these smaller projects has been very valuable.
Yes, and James is adding here, or was adding, is the industrial environment, steel, glass, paper for hydrogen a larger priority than transportation within the UK?
I think that depends on who you ask, honestly. But if I was, I always have, to add that I am not someone from the government. I think what we do as an association is we work very closely with understanding the government policy and representing our members' views, but reflecting what the government is let's say setting the scene for. If you look at government policy for hydrogen, it's currently very much wedded to industrial decarbonisation. So where there's an encouragement to take part in these HAR projects and to produce hydrogen, that's the direction in which government is encouraging this. Now, I think there are still projects that we see around mobility, and I think on a personal level and on behalf of the association, we would benefit from having that broader appreciation that there is a need to decarbonise with hydrogen in mobility as well as industry. But so it does depend on who you ask, but our current policy landscape is definitely more focused on industrial rather than mobility for hydrogen as a whole.
All right, then also someone who, do you know, Michaela Kendall? Hi, good to have you here. And she's asking, what are the gender splits of UK public funding going into R&D or investments into UK hydrogen technologies?
Wow, Michaela, that's a good question. I don't know that answer. Maybe I should know that answer, but that's something that obviously, when we look at the opportunities within our sector, we need to try and see that we have a good representation of all different backgrounds, including genders, that are pushing us forward. I'm a big believer that a diverse set of backgrounds and views will help us deliver what we want to, by having that sort of a broad spread of backgrounds and contributing to where we need to be. I see, I don't know the numbers, and it's fair to say that in many parts of our engineering and technology we can be male dominated, but I see a lot of talented women out there, and Michaela is clearly one of them. So she's been a long time representing in her sector, but through our universities and through entrepreneurs such as Amanda Line, who is our chair, is someone else that's been very active in this space for a long time. So we have some very good role models, that I think we just need to keep promoting the opportunities to all genders and backgrounds to join this sector.
Okay, and speaking about mobility, the question before, I have one going deeper into this topic from Gert-Jan Raab. And Gert-Jan is asking, can you explain a bit more about UK strategy for introduction of hydrogen for truck and bus fleets, as well construction equipment?
Okay, yeah. So in terms of the opportunities within mobility, these, one of the challenges we have in the UK, if I take a step backwards, is our hydrogen strategy is sitting within our Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. So they are responsible for looking at hydrogen across all applications. But I think it's fair to say, I hope I do not offend any of my government people on the line here, but it's fair to say that it's been so far dominated by hydrogen's role, as I've indicated, in supporting industrial decarbonisation and other, let's say, more strategic aims around things like long duration energy storage. Now, not everything has to happen through our government, and I show examples of entrepreneurial companies that are moving forward in a variety of different applications. But what we do lack, I think, within UK government thinking is a truly a truly broad-based appreciation that we need a variety of solutions to decarbonise on our roads. And the general principle from our Department for Transport is they are agnostic in terms of the solutions for decarbonising, but in reality we lack the types of measures that we see within Germany and Netherlands in particular, where there's a strong strategic endorsement for saying we need to support infrastructure for fueling both hydrogen vehicles as part of our zero emission drive, as well as putting in the infrastructure for battery technology. We're a bit lacking that, and we have a number of projects that have moved forward, some that haven't moved forward, but they're not part of an overall coherent strategy. So that's something that we want to continue to work with our government on, and to demonstrate to them what's happening in other countries, so that they can be inspired, and we can, let's say, be more active participants in this mobility space for hydrogen.
All right. Next one from Maxim Bragin. Regulatory environment in the UK is very restrictive, especially for larger hydrogen projects. Are there any initiatives going on currently to change this?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think it's something that we as an association recognise. As with many things, it's not something that one organisation or player can do on their own. We have a number of regulatory bodies that are taking the regulation that's come out of the industrial gas sector and trying to apply this for these new, let's say, emerging types of end use markets. And sometimes it's a real challenge trying to move forward when you can feel restricted in terms of that regulatory space. What we are doing in the HEA, we're not an association that's directly driving standards, but we do have the opportunity to bring together players that can identify the challenge and then hopefully deliver the solution. So we speak to organisations such as our Health and Safety Executive and other, I would say, partner associations such as people in the British Compressed Gas Association or others in end use sectors such as in mobility or in industry. I think we need to identify our challenges where things aren't moving forward because of regulation, and then see if we can move the dial on, in a safe and appropriate way, challenging some of these norms so that projects are not hindered because of a regulation that could be perhaps revised. So it takes time and collaboration, and that's one of our roles, I would say, just to try and keep that conversation going.
All right. Natasha Pall wants to dig deeper into HAR2. Apologies if I missed the explanation, but can you explain more the 27 shortlisted HAR2 projects being invited to offer 875 megawatt?
Yes. Okay. So we're in a situation where the HAR2 competition was opened, and developers had the opportunity to put forward their projects, and some of which were successful in terms of being shortlisted. And the number, I think, reflects, if you joined together, there was a public announcement of these 27 shortlisted projects, and if you count up the scale of all of those, that's where that number comes from. Now, it doesn't mean that all of those projects will be delivered, because they are in this kind of some kind of holding pattern at the moment. So government has said within the this HAR2 process, you are not rejected, you are one of the shortlisted projects. We do not know, honestly, how many of those projects will be further endorsed and moved forward to what they call this invitation to offer stage. And that's where I guess those projects have the opportunity to say, okay, I'm still interested, I still want to then negotiate contractual terms between government and the other stakeholders involved. So I would say this is one of the biggest sources of frustration that we have currently in our space in the UK, is that we've started this process for HAR2, but we have by no means ended it. And there's some companies for which they really, are so actively anticipating an update, so they know how to move forward with their teams and their plans. So that's the best thing I can say. I hope and anticipate that now this will come within this year. So we still have some months of the year, and I hope it's sooner rather than later. But this will be a big and important moment if we see some movement within the HAR2. Yeah.
All right. So we have some more, Emma, but we have some more minutes left. So I think we are good to go.
Okay.
And as I said, those 1.5 hours are sometimes, when there are coming a lot of questions, really fast running.
People have stayed awake, so I appreciate that. I appreciate the engagement. That's so fun.
That's good. Yeah. So nearly 100 people already live, so we're all good. And Justin Atkin is the next questioner here. What about the picture longer term? If recent polling is to be believed, the UK could see a future government dominated by Reform, who have totally different priorities on energy transition. Won't this impact investment?
Yeah, a really good question, and I think every country has this challenge of saying, okay, you have an energy policy that companies and investors align themselves to, but in many countries, if we have a change of government or change of political cycle, then the energy policy can change direction, and for sure, I think with the state of politics that we have right now, we do not necessarily have this coalescing of all different, let me say, political parties having a common view on energy. It can become quite divisive, and that's the anticipation of a change of government can make the confidence in long-term investment, a challenging one. What I do see though is I think the challenges that we all face are very similar. It's just sometimes the lens through which you look at it can vary. So we talk a lot at the moment about meeting commitments for net zero. I think most of us, when we look out the window at these high temperatures and we see the impact of where we are in our climate, can maybe anticipate that in some shape or form we need to be mindful of our climate situation. But not all, let's say, political parties see that as being top of their agenda. But most political parties, I think anyone that's in government wants to look at jobs, wants to look at energy security, wants to make sure that everyone can keep their lights on and keep driving their cars and all of these things. So I think that as a sector, what we need to be mindful of, not just in the UK, but in other parts of Europe as well, is to make sure that our value proposition is not just around net zero. We truly can anticipate hydrogen's role in sustainability, but hydrogen can do so much more. And I think we just need to make sure that we are selling the proposition to let's say the political parties in terms of where they see their priorities. But what we can add is often quite similar in terms of our role of hydrogen being an enabler in both energy security, energy resilience, innovation, as well as in addressing climate change. So yeah.
Okay. That's let me just scroll here. Francisco is asking, first telling, hi Emma, great presentation. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And then asking how you foresee the SAF market in UK.
Okay, that's a really interesting one, and there's a number of things at play within that. I guess in very broad terms, what I would see is that our sector can consider this as an opportunity, and within aviation, and yesterday I went to an event in aviation within the UK, which was really interesting because there's a number of different parallel paths, isn't there, of how this sector is decarbonising, and some are more short term and some are much more longer term. So, Airbus's interest in liquid hydrogen is something that we can all pay a level of attention to, but the timelines of that are long, and the how we move forward as a sector to introduce that infrastructure is also long. So we need to have a long-term vision to meet that part. With SAF production, when I speak to our members, they are seeing this as a really interesting off-taker. So for those that are producing hydrogen and seeing it as a feedstock for producing e-fuels, this feels like an attractive proposition. What we're working through, I guess, in the UK is trying to see what's the policy landscape that makes it attractive in the UK compared to Europe. Will we be able to keep our supply chains within the UK as well as working with our neighbours to find the feedstocks and the supply chains to deliver this fuel? There's some active consultations on this that we are taking part in as an association, and gathering views on whether the mandates towards sustainable aviation fuel and the policy levers for hydrogen production are complementary, and in some cases they can be perhaps not completely aligned. But I would say it's an active topic, and one that we are continuing to gather views of our membership so we can have sensible conversations with government around that opportunity.
Okay. Then I think we have 11 minutes to go, but no need to really go to 30. So 2 questions left, dear Emma, and then I will let you doing other things or just getting into contact with UK companies because Emma, you told us a lot of names, so that was really a deep dive here into the product technologies and also the names for sure.
Yeah.
Fiona Ross is the next one. And speaking about companies, she's asking for the map. Do you prefer your hydrogen map to focus on operational projects, or should it also include projects that are under construction or in development?
Yeah, so our map has all of these, in fact, so you can filter it to see different opportunities. That's why, to be fair, we have to keep a close eye on some these things to make sure it's up to date. So do tell us if any of you look at the map and see something that should be added or indeed removed, because it's very much a living proposition, and we try to track both projects that are announced, but also those that are live. But you can filter, so you can see the reality within that option. The other thing I would add, I have mentioned lots of names today. I have not by any means mentioned every member of the HEA, but we do have an industry directory. So if, again, we can share the link with you after the slides, but if you go to the HEA website, we have a very nice directory where you can see some of the companies I've mentioned today, but many others who are all playing their parts either in research or in production or in the supply chain or in various services. And they all have some very nice summaries and often contact details. But we also can facilitate those connections if some people on the line today wish to reach out to a certain organisation, we can help to make that introduction. So please do reach out in that situation.
Okay, and perhaps in the last minute, perhaps Liv, if you are online, you can perhaps find the link and share it in the chat. So we'll try to do that right now. So live is always best to do. And I will read the next question from Christine Chapitze. The UK is no longer a member of the European Union, which means EU legislation is not directly binding in the same way as it is for EU member states. Do you see this as a significant opportunity for the UK to develop a more flexible and innovation-friendly hydrogen regulatory framework compared to the EU? Or do you think alignment with EU regulations remains important for market integration, investment certainty, and cross-border hydrogen trade?
Wow, that's a great question, and a really interesting one. And it's one I try to think about the best way to answer this, because there's many lenses to look through our current relationship now between UK and our European neighbours. If you ask me on a very personal level, I like to see where we can find alignment and common opportunities, and that's more just the way that I like to work and collaborate. So on that side, I really look to see, can we find that common ground. So, but I don't know if that's speaking on behalf of all of the possibilities that we are, because I think if you just accept over the last 10 years that we have now a different relationship with Europe, it definitely gives us some challenges, but it also perhaps gives us some flexibility that that European member states do not have, and I guess we just need to look at that through the lens of how do we best make the opportunities with our neighbours, but perhaps consider that our agility might unlock some possibilities that I recognise can be more challenging when you're having to put every decision through to a large number of member states and reach that common ground. So I don't know if there's a single answer to that. I think we have to be pragmatic in terms of appreciating the opportunities, but continuing to strive for those opportunities for collaboration where we can. But indeed, if we had a change of government, I think our government position might also be quite different. So we have to ride the waves of these things and see how that relationship evolves. But I hope we can stay friends, because this is where business happens, right?
There you go. And two last questions. The first from Emily Moneylaws. If there's still time to answer, yes, we do have some 6 minutes.
Mhm.
What a- what opportunities, challenges do you think businesses in non-EU countries have when entering the UK hydrogen market? Do you think there's opportunities for strong UK non-EU collaboration in
Mm.
hydrogen?
Yeah, and I think it builds on the last question very well, actually, because I think if you look at how our current and our previous government has tried to frame the situation we now have as the, you know, the status of the UK, it it does give us perhaps that ability for more bilateral interactions with non-EU players, and it can be more complicated, but it also perhaps can give us again that kind of agility. I have been to events recently where I've engaged with stakeholders from Japan. In fact, that was recently this week, from India. We've had collaborations and discussions with players in South America. So I think again I think this is across our hydrogen sector anyway. I feel that we're at a status where I think Silke, you and I were talking about this at the very start, that no one can do this on their own, right? We really need that sort of these arms of contact and collaboration. Now that can be within a country, but I think if we look at how different countries are positioning themselves to take part in this growing sector, and in the longer term, I guess we will have technologies developing in some countries that can support others. We'll have some countries that have, let's say, certain resources that will lend themselves to wanting to export molecules or other technologies. And I think the more that we can understand how different countries are positioning themselves, that understanding will also lend itself to opportunities. So I think keeping the door open for these types of collaboration that also reflects some of the trading agreements that UK government has put in place with overseas countries. We can build on that, I hope, in a helpful and successful way.
Yes, you're so right. And well, I think it's really history that hydrogen always was cross-border, right? So we can look into our countries, we can look to technologies, but it's always cross-border 20, 30 years ago. And we should remain with these exchanges quite a lot. And I think one of the next chances that we have after summer is so for that I'm inviting you all in Hamburg for sure in October at the Hydrogen Technology World Expo, where not only German players and European players are gathering, but for sure the whole hydrogen world, about 600 exhibitors or so, when I'm correct. Yeah, and the German Association in parts also together with you, UK guys, we're really happy to align us there and to really look where do we have to be efficient and which projects are really running to convince our politicians that it's really a good idea to look into our field.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So we're looking forward to being there, and I think it's an important date in the diary for our hydrogen world. And
Yeah.
I looking forward to seeing you in person there, Silke, as well as many others who are on the line today.
Yeah, that's pretty important. And 60 people left. And one very last question came in from Hilary Fleming, if I'm okay to tell you that, because she's asking about the HAR in Scotland.
Okay.
So thank you. That was an interesting
Mm,
presentation.
mm,
Apologies if I missed this, but how
mm.
big is an impact HAR? No, how big an impact is HAR having or has the potential to have in Scotland?
Okay, that's a great question, and I feel I should also refer to my good friend Nigel Holmes. So he is the CEO of Hydrogen Scotland. So it's let's say a sort of definitely a friend of the HEA. And I think hopefully I can speak well on behalf of Nigel as well as myself to say that I think within HAR the potential is is most definitely there, because if you look at the renewable capacity that we have north of the border, as we say, within Scotland, it is extremely high. So it lends itself to the places where you could be utilising that renewable capacity to make the hydrogen. It's fair to say that there has been some switching within some of the HAR projects where some developers have stepped out. I would say not because it's in Scotland, but because as things get delayed, sometimes companies have a change of strategy, and they look to evolve how they want to participate in the energy sector. So there's been a couple of notable projects where in Scotland in HAR1 where developers have stepped out, but in fact others have stepped in to sort of take over that development role. So I don't think it will be too long before we see at least one of the FIDs coming for a hydrogen project in Scotland, and I know there's interest within HAR2 and beyond. So I think what we need to watch for, and I don't know if I mentioned this directly, but we are waiting for this updated, refreshed strategy coming from UK government that I think will show the direction where government believes industrial decarbonisation is best placed to use hydrogen. And I think it's a question of whether those off-takers are sitting in Scotland close to the renewable capacity. And that's going to be an interesting conversation for us to have, because I think the sector would like to see things in Scotland. I think it's just making sure it let's say, matches with UK policy thinking. So there's some more conversations to have on that, I would believe.
Okay, so I think that's good last words to step into this discussion. Hilary, we're good to go to really bring it on the desk. And because you're speaking about FID, Emma, I want to close not only with a big thank you to the participants of our Hydrogen Moves webinar today, together with the UK HEA, but also to you, Emma. And remember all, when you're taking pictures, please say FID, and then the smile is really broad. We all need it, and think about that for every picture that is coming, so that we show the world that there are real projects running.
Absolutely right. Absolutely.
That would be
thank
good,
you so
Emma,
much,
right?
Silke. Yes, thank you. We all want to celebrate our victories, so I think we can definitely do that. Thank you so much.
We do. See you soon all at the latest after summer break, then coming in August, I would say, for most of us. Latest in October with our webinars. We have one in October 1, as I told you, with the AI in HAZOP, but for sure more topics are planned, and happy to see you all again soon. And with this, I will let you step out, and Emma, just take your time for some more 5 minutes for a short debrief here.
Yes,
but the other guests, feel free to do now other things and tell the world that UK is really an interesting hydrogen market.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Bye-bye.